In our last unit, we will be looking at how living things obtain energy. So the basic concept behind energy is that all living things need it in order to do work. We need it to do metabolism in our body. We need to be able to use our muscles and to move and things like that. So energy is very necessary. So where do we get our energy from? That is mainly from the food that we eat, right? So we get it from carbohydrates and other things like that, and then plants are going to get theirs directly from the sun. So chemical energy comes from organic molecules that are storing energy in their bonds. So a reminder, organic molecules are the lipids, carbs, proteins, and nucleic acids. We talked about at the beginning of the year how carbohydrates have a lot of energy in their bonds because they're very complex. Lipids have a lot of energy too. Proteins have a little bit less, but they still have quite a bit of energy. And then nucleic acids are the ones that we can't use for energy. So heterotrophs are going to take in these organic molecules through eating or through food consumption. Okay, so we would have to eat these compounds. We cannot make them by ourselves. An autotroph is going to make their own food, and then they have to use their own food. So they're making glucose constantly, but then they have to still use that in order to grow taller and to grow their roots and things like that. So they're making it and then using it. So just a review of some terms. A producer is something that can get their energy directly from the sun. A consumer has to actually eat other things in order to get that energy. So we have to eat other plants or other animals. You remember from the ecology unit, energy is lost as it gets passed up from one level to the next in a food chain. And 90% of that energy is lost. So that means 10% of that energy is passed from one level to the next. Okay, there's two basic energy molecules. Glucose is sugar, right? It's a simple carbohydrate. It's the monomer of starches and larger complex carbohydrates. So we abbreviate that C6H12O6. And you will need to memorize that formula for this unit. Glucose is incredibly stable. It can obviously stay on your counter for a long period of time. It stays stored in roots for a long period of time. So it's very easily transferable. It's kind of a big molecule though, so when we're talking your muscle trying to do some work, try to move, it can't just get energy right from glucose. It's too complicated of a molecule. So that is kind of the problem with glucose. It is the end product of photosynthesis, so the plants are making glucose. That's their job, is to make glucose for themselves, and then as a byproduct for us too. ATP is a molecule that at the beginning of the year we talked about how it's just energy. You just have to memorize the ATP as energy. In this unit we're going to learn why that's energy. So it stands for adenosine triphosphate. This little molecular structure down here is ATP. And basically all of these little bonds in here are carrying energy. And when our body needs some energy, it's going to take this molecule, it's going to pop this bond off right here in between these two P's right here. We're going to pop it off. And when we pop off one of these phosphates, it goes from being a triphosphate to a diphosphate. So that's why the wording changes there. And when we break a bond, energy is released. Okay, if you remember back to our cell unit, which organelle is creating ATP? And that would be the mitochondria. If you don't remember that, you might want to write that in your notes right now. So the basic premise here is that when you are making bond, that takes energy, and when you're breaking it, releases it. So as the plants are doing photosynthesis, that takes all kinds of energy in order to make those bonds, and so they're getting that from the sun. And then when we are eating that glucose and we're breaking the bonds, the energy comes out and we can use it. Okay, so glucose is a stable molecule. that can be transferred from the plants to us. And then we use a process called cellular respiration to break that glucose down and turn it into ATP. And that ATP is just stored in our body, and whenever we need it, it's ready to go. Okay, and then plants are going to make glucose, and then they're going to make their own ATP from it. So if you're going to look at those two molecules, glucose would be like carrying a $100 bill in your wallet, and ATP would be like $1 bills. So although glucose is energy and a $100 bill is money, when you're going to go buy a candy bar at a grocery store and you only need $1.20 in order to buy it, using a $100 bill to buy a candy bar is a little outrageous. But if you have a couple $1 bills, it's much easier. So they're both energy in the same way, only ATP is just more usable. It's much more accessible for your body, and so therefore it can be taken in and used easier. Okay, so these are the two equations that you're going to have to memorize for this unit. So we're going to go through photosynthesis first, and you know all this information from everything we've learned so far this year, but it's basically putting it together and then memorizing the order of things. Okay, so animals are going to breathe out carbon dioxide. And then plants obviously need water in order to grow and some sun. Okay, we're going to take those things through a whole bunch of chemical processes, and we're going to make sugar, which the plants are going to store in their roots, and oxygen, which is going to be their waste product. The plants don't care about oxygen at all. It's really a nice thing that they make oxygen for us, but that's not the purpose of photosynthesis. The purpose is to make sugar so that it can perform its functions. Okay, now if you notice, the cell respiration equation is basically the opposite. So we eat the sugar and we breathe in the oxygen, and when we breathe out, we get rid of CO2 and water as waste. Both of these are waste products. And then our main product is a bunch of energy, so we can do all of our work. Okay, so notice it's basically the reverse of this equation, only here we have ATP energy as a product, and what's going into photosynthesis is light energy. So we're somehow able to take this light energy, make sugars, and then get a product out of that. And that's the basics of energy.